I still remember the exact sound of his voice that day, casual, almost amused, as though what he had done was nothing more than forgetting to take out the trash. "You didn't need it anyway," my father said, his words floating through my phone speaker, slicing through me like a blade. He was talking about my college fund, the money I had spent years building through scholarships, endless part-time shifts, tutoring kids after class, working through summers when everyone else was at the beach. The money I had treated like sacred fuel for my dream, and he had stolen it, just like that. At 25, standing alone in my cramped London apartment, I listened as my own father calmly explained why my account was empty. "What's done is done," he said. "No point in getting upset about it now." My throat tightened, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "How much is left?" I asked. My fingers trembled against the desk where stacks of notes from my semester abroad lay scattered. My future hung on his next words. "Left? None of it's left, honey." He chuckled as if we were talking about loose change misplaced under a couch cushion. "I had some debts to clear up. But don't worry, you're smart. You'll figure something out." I remember staring at the cracked paint on my apartment wall, trying to steady my breathing. 4 years of saving. 4 years of scraping together every bit of aid I could find. 4 years of telling myself that hard work and sacrifice would pay off. And in a few phone calls and a handful of withdrawals, he had erased it all. Not just the money, but the faith I had clung to that deep down, maybe my father cared about me more than he cared about his mistakes. He mistook my silence for agreement. "That's my girl," he said warmly. "Always practical. Just like your old dad." Then his voice shifted into that dismissive tone I knew too well. "Listen, I've got to run. Meeting some friends for drinks. We'll talk soon." Friends for drinks. With my money. With my future. I sank into the chair by the window, looking out at the bustling London street I had grown to love. I had 3 months left before I was supposed to graduate. 3 months left before I'd return home and begin building the life I had fought so hard for. But now I had no idea if I'd even be allowed to finish my degree. Moments later, my phone buzzed again. A text. From him. "Don't mention this to your mom or grandmother. No need to worry them." Of course, he never wanted anyone to know. Just like when he hid his gambling debts. Just like the business ventures that collapsed into nothing. Just like the endless borrowing money he never returned, promises he never kept. I opened my laptop with shaking hands and began making a list. Bank statements, proof of my deposits, scholarship records, legal resources, financial aid options, anything that could help me salvage the wreckage. My father had always underestimated me. He'd laugh when I brought home straight A's. "Good thing you're pretty," he'd say dismissively, as if my intelligence meant nothing. He'd joke that I could always marry rich if college didn't work out. But I hadn't spent years clawing my way toward a future just to let him destroy it. He thought my calm acceptance meant defeat. What he didn't realize was that practical was the one thing he should fear most about me. Within days, the full scope of his betrayal came into focus. Over $42,000 gone, every penny I had built since high school. Withdrawn in small amounts just under the threshold that would raise alarms. He hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen time, sweat, and the faith that maybe family meant security. My roommate, Emma, found me one evening surrounded by papers, my hands ink-stained from printing statements. "Your father did what?" she gasped, leaning over the desk. "Technically, the account was still in his name," I explained, my voice hollow. "Legally, he had the right. I just never thought he'd actually—" My words trailed off. But in my heart, I knew. I should have known. He had borrowed my birthday money when I was a child and never paid it back. He had tried to convince me to take out extra loans in my name, promising he'd help repay them. Patterns I ignored because he was my father, because I wanted so badly to believe in him. And then, as if mocking me, another text came through. "Don't stress about the money. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break from school. I know some guys who could get you a modeling job, better money than that degree." That was the moment the anger overtook the grief. The moment I realized to him I wasn't a daughter. I was a resource, a safety net, a backup plan he could exploit whenever he felt the ground slipping beneath his own feet. I called my grandmother the next morning. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. But she heard enough in my voice to know something was wrong. "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone fierce and unwavering. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of strength return. I wasn't going to let him get away with it, not this time. When I finally told my grandmother everything, her reaction was swift and fiery. She was the only person my father had ever truly feared, and for good reason. At 70, she still had the sharpness of a woman who had weathered storms and refused to be broken by them. The moment the words left my mouth, she slammed her hand on the table. That man, she spat, has gone too far this time. We arranged a video call that same evening. My mother and aunt joined from my childhood home. As I held up the bank statements, scrolling through text messages where my father joked about using my education fund for his debts, I saw my mother's hands tremble. Her lips quivered. I had no idea she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. He told me you decided to take a break from school, that you wanted to come back home. Of course. My father had always been skilled at twisting stories to suit his needs. He had done it for years, spinning narratives that made him look like a provider while secretly undermining me. How many times had he reinterpreted my achievements to make them about him? How many times had he casually claimed credit for my success while trying to control the very path I walked? I've been documenting everything I told them firmly, every withdrawal, every message, every call. I won't let him get away with this. My aunt leaned forward, the lawyer in her coming alive. It's tricky since he was a co-signer, she explained, but if you have written proof that the money was meant for your education, we have leverage. I pulled up the emails where he admitted it was my fund, where he promised someday to make it right. I showed them the texts where he mocked the idea of paying me back. My aunt's eyes glinted. Not legally binding, she said, but more than enough to pressure him. My grandmother's voice cut through the call like steel. We make Gregory realize exactly what he's done, and who he's done it to. That was when the plan began to form. My grandmother would confront him directly, stripping him of the illusion that no one knew. My aunt would draft a formal demand letter laying out the evidence, the expectation of repayment, and the consequences. And my mother would finally do what she had been too afraid to do for years, file for divorce. He's always underestimated you, my grandmother told me later, her voice softening. Always treated you like an extension of himself instead of your own person. It's time he learns who you really are. The first confrontation came sooner than I expected. My phone lit up late one night. Your grandmother seemed upset today. My father's voice drawled, forced calmness coating every word. You didn't tell her anything, did you? My heart pounded as I answered evenly. About what, Dad? About the college fund you stole? About the future you tried to derail? Or about how little my education means to you compared to your debts? Silence. Then a fumbling attempt. Now, Princess. Don't call me Princess. I snapped the word slicing out of me before I could stop it. My chest burned. Don't call me at all. Everything goes through Aunt Sarah from now on. The shift in his tone was immediate. Sarah, why would your aunt need to be involved? Because she's a lawyer, and you're about to need one. I hung up before he could respond, my hands trembling, my breath ragged. But beneath the shaking, there was something else, the first spark of power. For the first time, I was not his victim. His response was predictable. First denial, then fury. My phone lit up with messages. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just money. Family is more important than money. But this time I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded every single message to my aunt, each one another brick in the case we were quietly building. Days later, he showed up at my grandmother's house where I had gone to stay until my return flight. He stood on the porch, his face twisted in feigned innocence. Mother, please, he begged, lowering his voice. This is a family matter. My grandmother didn't even open the door. Her voice rang out sharp enough for the neighbors to hear. Exactly. And you betrayed your family. Now leave before I call the police. I watched from the window as he slunk away, humiliated. Yet my phone buzzed within minutes. Your grandmother's turned you against me. I'm your father. You owe me respect. After everything I've done for you, and I thought of everything he had actually done. How he borrowed from me as a child. How he dismissed my achievements. How he saw my success as something he could cash in on whenever he needed. No, he didn't deserve respect. Not anymore. The demand letter arrived at his house the following week. My aunt had laid it all out in black and white, every withdrawal, every broken promise, every expectation of repayment. His outraged call came that night. "You can't sue your own father," he shouted. "Watch me," I said, then hung up. What followed was a storm. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years reached out horrified by what they'd learned. His sister admitted he had stolen money from her children's birthday cards. My mother, finally freed from years of denial, filed for divorce citing financial betrayal among her reasons. And when his first court hearing forced him to admit the truth, the carefully polished mask of the fun-loving father cracked. The judge's voice dripped with disbelief. "You emptied your daughter's college fund to pay gambling debts." The silence that followed was the first time I truly felt him lose. The fallout spread faster than even I expected. Once the truth was out, it was like a dam bursting. Every lie my father had carefully constructed over the years began to crumble, and the people he'd fooled for so long finally saw him for who he was. At the divorce hearing, his voice shook as he tried to defend himself. "I was going to pay it back," he stammered, but the judge wasn't moved. "With what money? According to these records, you haven't held a steady job in 3 years." His excuses fell apart under the weight of paperwork, bank statements, hidden withdrawals, gambling debts. Each page laid bare the reality he had spent decades concealing. The financial aid office at my university surprised me with their compassion. Once I explained what had happened, they helped me apply for emergency funding and restructure my payments for the final semester. My grandmother insisted on covering what she could. "Unlike your father," she said firmly, "I know the value of education, and I keep my promises." Meanwhile, my aunt unearthed even more evidence. He claimed poverty in response to the demand letter, insisting he had no way to repay me. But then photos surfaced a new car, a vacation, nights out at his country club. "He's not broke," my aunt said with grim satisfaction. "He's just hiding assets." But not well enough. The messages from him grew more desperate and more revealing. "You're ruining my life. My own daughter turning against me. I raised you better than this." He tried guilt, tried pity, tried to twist the story until I looked like the cruel one. But I'd stopped letting his words cut me. Each new message, each attempt at manipulation became another reminder of why I needed to fight. Then came the final betrayal. He tried to turn my younger cousins against me. He told them I was bankrupting him out of spite, that I was cold and ungrateful. But instead of turning on me, they shared his messages with me, adding them to the growing folder of evidence I'd collected. "Remember when Uncle Greg told us our college funds were safe with him?" my cousin Jake wrote. "Guess we know what that meant." Together, my cousins moved quickly to protect themselves, securing their funds before he could touch them. Piece by piece, his control over the family unraveled. He wasn't just my problem anymore. He had been using all of us in one way or another. During my mother's divorce proceedings, even darker truths came out. He had been taking out loans in her name, hiding debts, even attempting to remortgage the house without her knowledge. For years, she had believed his stories, brushed aside the warnings, convinced herself that his charm and excuses outweighed the harm. But sitting in court, hearing his lies, exposed one after another, she finally saw him for who he was. "He's treated the whole family like his personal ATM," she told me afterward, her voice heavy with both grief and relief. "And we kept making excuses for him." My grandmother, unshaken, called another family meeting without him. This time, cousins, aunts, and uncles filled the screen. Story after story poured out money borrowed and never returned. Promises broken, manipulations dressed up as generosity. Each confession painted a fuller picture of a man who had relied on family loyalty as his shield, convinced it would always protect him. But not anymore. "Loyalty goes both ways," my aunt declared, "and he's never shown any to us. It's time we stop protecting him from consequences." The dominoes began to fall. First, my mother's lawyer uncovered hidden accounts, ensuring she received a much larger settlement than my father anticipated. Then, under mounting pressure, he was forced into a repayment plan for the money he had stolen from me, complete with interest. The image he had spent his life cultivating, the fun-loving, generous father, the man people trusted, collapsed overnight. Friends who had invested in his ventures realized they had been scammed. Relatives stopped answering his calls. Family members he once leaned on now openly condemned him. His texts shifted again. Gone was the anger replaced with pleading. I'm still your father. Everyone makes mistakes. Why can't you forgive me? What will people think of you treating your dad this way? But I had finally reached a place where his words didn't shake me anymore. He wasn't my protector. He wasn't my role model. He was a man who had stolen from his own daughter, lied to his family, and believed he was entitled to forgiveness without ever truly changing. Through my grandmother's connections, I secured a part-time job that let me balance work and my final year of school. My professors gave me the flexibility I needed. Each small victory, each bill I paid on my own, each assignment I submitted, felt like a step further out of his shadow. The family, too, began to shift. Cousins who had once admired him now told me their own stories of how he manipulated them. Aunts and uncles who had covered for him now openly stood against him. Even relatives I barely knew reached out offering words of encouragement. One evening over dinner, my grandmother told me he had tried calling her again. He wanted me to convince you to drop the repayment plan, she said, her face set in stone. What did you tell him? I asked, bracing myself. I told him he destroyed this family himself the moment he stole from you. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The day of my graduation should have been pure joy. After everything I had endured, sleepless nights balancing work and studies, the endless legal battles, the betrayal that had once nearly broken me, I was finally walking across that stage. But of course my father had to try and steal even that moment. He showed up uninvited, dressed in a suit too flashy for the occasion, plastering on his old charm like a mask that no longer fit. "That's my girl," he announced loudly to anyone who would listen, puffing out his chest, as if he had been the one sitting through lectures, writing papers, fighting for every ounce of funding. Gets her business sense from me. Before I could even react, Aunt Sarah, my rock through every battle, stepped in. With a calm authority only a lawyer could carry, she had security escort him out before the ceremony even began. "Your success belongs to you," she told me firmly afterward, her hand squeezing mine. "He doesn't get to claim credit for what he tried to destroy." In that moment, for the first time, I truly believed her. The year that followed became a turning point. The divorce finalized my mother free from years of manipulation and debt she never agreed to. His financial schemes exposed one after another, leaving him with little to cling to but excuses. Old friends turned their backs on him. Relatives who once defended him now demanded repayment for money they'd loaned and never seen again. Meanwhile, my own life finally began to bloom. My grandmother's fierce protection and my mother's new independence gave me space to grow without the constant weight of his shadow. I secured a position at a top firm in London, my degree and perseverance opening doors I had once feared would remain closed. My small London flat, modest, but entirely mine, became a sanctuary decorated with pieces that reflected only my taste, my choices, my freedom. The repayment plan my aunt forced him into continued each month. Direct deductions, no loopholes, no excuses. He complained endlessly, calling it unfair, but he paid, because this time he had no choice. Every payment to me wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that he could do the right thing when he was forced to, proof that all his excuses had always been lies, proof that he had underestimated me and lost. But even then he tried to claw his way back into my life. A birthday card arrived, the first in years. Inside he had scrawled, "Love, Dad, your biggest supporter." The audacity nearly made me laugh. Then came the social media posts, old family photos he tagged me in with captions about how he had always encouraged my dreams. The captions painted him as the devoted father who had sacrificed everything for me. Lies carefully curated for an audience who didn't know the truth. Aunt Sarah helped me draft a cease and desist letter. "He's trying to rewrite history," she explained. And she was right. He wasn't just after forgiveness, he was after control of the narrative. But I had my own narrative now. At work, I earned promotions through sheer determination. At home, my grandmother visited her pride in me, shining brighter than any diploma. At family gatherings, I was no longer the naive daughter, the backup plan my father thought he could drain. I was someone who had stood against him and won. One night over dinner in London, my grandmother lifted her glass and smiled at me. "You know what makes me proudest?" she asked. "Not just what you've achieved, but how you achieved it. You didn't let him turn you bitter. You just got stronger." Her words hit deeper than she could have known. Because the truth was, I had battled bitterness. I had wrestled with anger so sharp it could have carved scars into me forever. But each time I wanted to collapse under the weight of what he had taken, I thought of my grandmother's voice. Of my mother's trembling hands, the day she learned the truth of the family who had once excused his behavior, but now stood beside me. And I realized surviving him was not enough. I had to rise beyond him. 2 years after the confrontation, he was still paying. Each month, another installment of the money he once thought he could take without consequence. He tried countless times to delay, to plead poverty to guilt me into dropping the plan. But Aunt Sarah never wavered, and neither did I. At a family gathering, Jake beamed as he told me he had graduated debt-free. "You know what Uncle Greg said?" He laughed. "That I should thank you for overreacting about your fund." Said your dramatic response taught him a lesson. "Did he really learn, though?" I asked dryly. "Maybe not," Jake shrugged, "but he sure learned not to target anyone who has good lawyers." We laughed together, but inside I knew the truth. My father hadn't learned remorse. He had learned limits. And for me, that was enough. The final payment arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, a wire transfer small compared to the weight of what it represented. Attached was a short note. "Now can we be family again?" I stared at the words on my screen, my chest tightening not from longing, but from the hollow echo of recognition. He hadn't changed. Even now, after being forced to repay every cent he stole, he believed money could buy back what he had shattered. He thought family was a switch I could turn back on with a signature. I filed the receipt neatly into the folder I had kept since the beginning. Inside were the bank statements that first revealed the theft, the angry texts, the fake apologies, the screenshots of his manipulations, the legal documents that forced him to face consequences. I didn't keep them because I still needed them, but because they told the story of how far I had come. My mother, now remarried and genuinely happy for the first time in decades, put it best when she hugged me at a holiday gathering. "He thought taking your money would keep you dependent on him," she said softly. "Instead, it set you free." She was right. Every time he tried to pull me down, I had risen higher. Every attempt to trap me had only sharpened my resolve. His punishment was not just the repayment plan or the loss of his family's respect. His greatest punishment was having to watch me succeed without him, beyond him, despite him. When my firm promoted me again, inviting me to speak at our annual charity gala, I stood before the crowd and told my story. Not about him directly, but about the moment I learned my college fund was gone. I spoke of betrayal, yes, but more importantly, of resilience. Sometimes I told the audience my voice steady: the people who should support you the most become the obstacles you must overcome. Their underestimation becomes your motivation. The room erupted in applause, but the true reward came later when I saw the pride in my grandmother's eyes. She had lived long enough to see her granddaughter not just survive betrayal, but transform it into power. I learned something through all of this. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Love is not the same as blind loyalty. Family is not defined by blood alone, but by the people who show up for you, who protect your dreams, who celebrate your victories without needing to steal them. My father will always be a part of my story, the part that taught me pain, the part that nearly broke me. But he is not the ending. He is not the definition of who I am. I am the girl who lost everything she had saved and still found a way to finish. I am the woman who faced betrayal from the man who should have loved her most and used that betrayal as fuel to build a life beyond his reach. And every time I look at my degree on the wall at the home I built with my own strength, I am reminded that his greatest mistake wasn't stealing my money. It was underestimating me. So if you're listening to this and you've ever felt betrayed by the people who should have protected you, I want you to remember something. Their choices don't define you. Your strength does. Your refusal to break, your decision to rise anyway, your courage to claim the future they tried to steal, that is what will carry you forward. Don't let their betrayal turn you bitter. Let it turn you unstoppable. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to rise above someone who tried to hold you back? I want to hear your story too.